a haunting of the Lizzie Borden House. It was a chilly autumn evening when Emma Matheson first arrived at the infamous Lizzie Borden House in Fall River, Massachusetts. The house loomed before her, its darkened windows like eyes watching her every move. Emma, a history enthusiast and paranormal investigator, had been fascinated by the story of Lizzie Borden for years. Now, she had the opportunity to spend a night in the house where the gruesome murders of Andrew and Abby Borden took place in 1892. Emma checked in with the caretaker, Mrs. Jenkins, a stern woman with a sharp gaze. "Remember," Mrs. Jenkins warned, "this house has seen terrible things. Respect the spirits here, and they might leave you be." Emma nodded, her excitement mingled with a twinge of apprehension. She made her way to her room on the second floor, passing through the dimly lit hallway where the air seemed to grow heavier with each step. The room she was staying in had once belonged to Lizzie herself. The walls were adorned with antique wallpaper, and an old four-poster bed stood in the center, its wooden frame creaking under the weight of history. As night fell, the house settled into an eerie silence. Emma set up her equipment: cameras, voice recorders, and EMF detectors. She was determined to capture evidence of the paranormal activity rumored to plague the Borden house. She began her investigation by calling out into the darkness, "Is anyone here with me?" At first, there was nothing but the sound of the wind rattling the windows. Then, faintly, she heard it, a whisper, so soft it was almost inaudible. Emma's heart raced as she played back the recording. The voice, barely discernible, seemed to say, "Help me." Chills ran down her spine. She decided to explore the house, starting with the parlor where Andrew Borden was found murdered. The room was cold, unnaturally so, and the air felt thick. As Emma stood in the center of the room, the temperature dropped even further, and she could see her breath misting in front of her. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her. She turned quickly, but there was no one there. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, and she could hear the faint sound of footsteps, though she saw no one. Emma took a deep breath and tried to steady her nerves. Next, she moved to the guest room where Abby Borden had met her gruesome end. The room was eerily quiet. Emma set up her camera and began to ask questions again. "Who is here with me? Why are you still in this house?" The silence was deafening. Just as she was about to give up, the room grew colder, and the EMF detector spiked. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she saw a shadow move across the room. She turned, and for a brief moment, she saw the figure of a woman in old-fashioned clothing standing by the bed. The woman's face was contorted in pain, her eyes pleading, and then she was gone. Emma's hands shook as she replayed the footage. The camera had captured the shadow, but the face was obscured. Determined to uncover more, she ventured into the basement, a place many claimed was the epicenter of the house's dark energy. The basement was damp and cold, the walls lined with old stone. The smell of mildew was overpowering. Emma turned on her flashlight and scanned the area. It was then she noticed something unusual: a small, wooden door she hadn't seen before, partially hidden behind old crates. Curiosity getting the better of her, Emma pushed the crates aside and opened the door. A narrow staircase led down into a pitch-black void. Steeling herself, she descended, each step creaking under her weight. At the bottom, she found a small, musty room, its walls covered in strange, cryptic symbols. In the center of the room was an old, wooden trunk. Emma approached it cautiously, her flashlight beam wavering. She opened the trunk, revealing a collection of old, yellowed photographs and a leather-bound journal. She picked up the journal and began to read. The journal belonged to Lizzie Borden. It detailed her thoughts and feelings leading up to the murders, revealing a tormented mind filled with anger and fear. But the most chilling entry was the last one, written in a shaky hand. "They whisper to me, telling me to do terrible things. I cannot escape them. They are always watching, always waiting." As Emma read the final words, a sense of dread washed over her. She felt a cold breath on the back of her neck and heard a soft whisper, "You shouldn't have come here." She turned to see the figure of Lizzie Borden standing in the doorway, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. "Leave this place. Lizzie whispered, her voice echoing in the small room. Before it's too late, Emma stumbled back, the journal falling from her hands. She ran up the stairs, her heart pounding. As she reached the top, the door slammed shut behind her with a force that shook the house. She raced through the basement and up to the main floor, not daring to look back. The house seemed to come alive with whispers and shadows, following her every step. She could hear the echoes of past horrors, the cries of the tormented souls trapped within its walls. Bursting out the front door, Emma gasped for breath, the night air cold and sharp. Mrs. Jenkins was waiting outside, her expression grim. "Did you find what you were looking for?" she asked. Emma shook her head, still trembling. "There are things in that house," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Things that should never be disturbed." Mrs. Jenkins nodded. "Some secrets are meant to stay buried," she said quietly, "and some spirits are never at rest." As Emma drove away from the Lizzie Borden house, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The whispers had followed her, echoing in her mind, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lingered within those walls. She knew she would never forget the terror she had experienced, and the haunted eyes of Lizzie Borden, forever etched in her memory. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell icon so you never miss an update. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next video.